"Keep your mouth shut. Cash the check." That's what they whispered as one of them tugged at her waistband. Another chart topper. Another cover-up. A third man leaned against the hallway exit, blocking it without effort. They weren't drunk. They weren't sloppy. They moved with certainty because the cameras were offline. The stairwell had a maintenance notice slapped on it, and the woman they surrounded was alone, outnumbered, and dressed like she'd just come down to run a load of laundry. What they failed to realize was that the woman they'd just grabbed was a Tier 1 operator. And half a minute later, one of them was unconscious, one was leaking blood, one was shaking, and the last was still clutching his phone. Only now, it wasn't a toy, it was evidence. Before we break down how the setup unraveled and the entire installation was forced into an internal reckoning, tap like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments which base you're watching from. Because this situation wasn't brushed aside. It was dismantled. The transport vehicle growled to a halt outside a sand-colored administrative block, plain concrete, a single flagpole, one aging camera, and no fanfare whatsoever. No greetings. No formalities. Just another routine day at Ashcroft Joint Readiness Facility, a low-profile support post cycling mixed units through pre-deployment checks. The kind of place people passed through, completed evaluations, and disappeared from memory. Except Lieutenant Commander Mara Vale wasn't passing through. She stepped down from the van carrying a compact duffel and no entourage. No one reached for her bag. No one needed to. She moved like someone who didn't need recognition to command space. Her uniform was spotless but forgettable. Nothing about her stance screamed importance, but nothing about her presence invited casual curiosity either. The heat was sharp and dry. The air smelled like baked asphalt and tired uniforms. Mara paused briefly, not from nerves but habit. She mapped exits, checked rooflines, noted which windows were dark and which reflected active screens. She cataloged details most people ignored, especially those who assumed nothing would go wrong. A corporal approached with a clipboard and a grin that lingered too long to be genuine. "Ma'am, we don't see many Navy officers around here," he said, letting out a laugh that overstayed its welcome. Mara held his gaze just long enough for the humor to die. "Then handle it like you would," she replied calmly. He blinked, stiffened. "Yes, ma'am." He led her inside, past corkboards crowded with expired procedures and sun-bleached motivational slogans. The administrative wing hummed with surface-level productivity. NCOs moved with purpose, boots echoing, radios murmuring low. Everyone appeared busy enough to avoid meeting eyes. Mara clocked what went unspoken. How women softened their voices when certain men passed. How laughter in the break area stalled when officers drew near. How some corridors were monitored and others conspicuously weren't. And how a maintenance notice outside a stairwell had been copied so many times it looked like a faded shadow of itself. On paper, she was assigned as an inter-service readiness assessor, part of a routine evaluation team reviewing cross-branch coordination before deployment cycles. In reality, she carried a sealed envelope tucked into her bag bearing two words that made commanders uneasy: environmental audit. She wasn't here because something slipped through the cracks. She was here because someone had been pushed, quietly, repeatedly, and by design. The duty officer gestured down a side corridor toward temporary officer housing. "You're set up in the annex, Commander. If you need anything, I'm your point of contact." She answered with a single nod and headed down the hall. Her footsteps were silent. The radio chatter didn't shift, but behind her, someone double-checked the name on her chest. In the quiet that followed, a system already under strain failed to realize it had just been flagged for overhaul. No base ever called it a tour, but there was always someone, usually logistics, who volunteered to show newcomers around under the mask of courtesy. At Ashcroft, it was a staff sergeant named Halden, friendly, quick-spoken, and a touch too relaxed. "Annex housing's got the basics," he said, guiding her past rows of squat barracks. "Temporary but serviceable. Laundry's ground floor. Bathrooms were updated a couple years back. Machines jam all the time, though." Mara gave a neutral nod. She neither encouraged nor discouraged the chatter. Silence made people talk more than questions ever did. They reached a narrow overhang opening into a bare concrete corridor, utilitarian and overdue for inspection. The building stretched into a straight line of single rooms, stripped-down quarters for short-term staff, trainers, and rotating evaluators like her. "You're at the end," Halden said. "Quiet spot, no neighbors." "Works," she replied. As they passed a door taped shut with a red X, Halden gestured casually. The sign reading stairwell access, utility maintenance was barely readable beneath layers of old adhesive. "Out of service," he said. "Flagged last year, supposed to stay closed, but nobody uses it." Mara stopped. The caution tape was pristine, fresh from a new roll. The latch was off-center, the lock scratched, like someone had forced it not long ago and never bothered to fix it. Above the frame sat a dome camera. She tilted her head. The indicator light was dead, she didn't mention it. She logged it. Farther down, another faded notice read. "Warning. Surveillance inactive zone." That phrasing didn't appear in any official manual she'd ever read. As they moved farther down the corridor, Morgan caught fragments of a conversation ahead. Two women stepped out of a room, duty uniforms half undone, laundry bags slung over tired shoulders. One murmured to the other, "Just don't take the stairwell by the laundry. Seriously." The second woman noticed Morgan and cut herself off mid-sentence. Both women quickened their pace and disappeared down a side hall. Lieutenant Carver didn't seem to register it, or chose not to. Morgan said nothing. By the time she reached her assigned quarters, she'd already mapped every blind angle between her door and the laundry area. She logged the fact that the side entrance went unwatched after 1900. Patrol routes followed a pattern, but the annex was skipped entirely on some loops, and anyone entering that utility stairwell wouldn't be missed unless they failed to come back out. Morgan shut the door quietly and placed her bag down with care. Every installation had a spot like this. Not forbidden, not criminal on paper, just ignored long enough that men with rank bent the rules out of sight, and this time they had no idea who had just walked in. The morning briefing was already underway when Morgan entered the observation tier overlooking the joint operations floor. She stayed near the wall, half swallowed by shadow, just another visiting officer supposedly reviewing procedures. That's what they assumed. The room hummed with casual authority. Seasoned NCOs, fresh lieutenants, instructors pulled from multiple branches. Different uniforms, same atmosphere. Recycled motivation masking dull routine. The kind of place where discipline softened and habits replaced standards. At the center of it all sat Staff Sergeant Evan Rourke. Trim, polished, smile a little too practiced. His voice carried without effort. The kind of man labeled a born leader because he talked over people with confidence. Around him clustered three others. Corporal Mason Reed, bigger, louder, more aggressive than clever. He clapped shoulders too hard and invaded personal space. Private Cole Marin, the youngest, anxious to belong, eyes constantly flicking to Rourke for approval. And Specialist Nalan Keefe, thin, quiet, phone always in hand, thumb scrolling with purpose. Morgan recognized that type instantly, the collector, not bold, just waiting. Together they laughed too long. Their jokes landed flat, and their posture only shifted when a woman entered the room. Morgan didn't take notes. She didn't need to. She cataloged patterns. When a female corpsman stepped up to adjust the projector cable, Reed muttered, "Looks like she's practiced that move." Loud enough for Rourke to chuckle. Marin smiled a second too late. Keefe raised his phone slightly, pretending to text. Maybe he caught her posture, maybe her reaction. Morgan noticed the corpsman tense, not visibly, just a tightening at the shoulders, the kind of reflex that meant don't respond or it'll get worse. She fixed the cable and walked away without a word. Her friend followed and whispered, "Why do you let them say stuff like that?" The answer came barely above breath. "Because reporting it just gets you reassigned." Morgan's face didn't shift, but her heartbeat slowed. This was the point. Not to interrupt, not yet. To observe the ritual. Later in the locker corridor, she passed Keefe snapping a photo of someone tying a boot. Low angle, no flash. The woman never noticed. Morgan did. None of it was accidental. Each overstep was precise, small enough to avoid charges. Large enough to reinforce boundaries and consequences. She waited until evening to open the sealed envelope buried in her duffel. Inside, one sentence glared in red beneath the clearance stamp. Immediate authority granted in the event of a hostile climate incident. Chain of command may be bypassed. She closed the folder and secured it in the drawer. Because when a system decays quietly, you don't announce yourself. You watch, you wait, then you audit. By the time the installation settled into night cycle, Hickory felt the way it always did after lights out, silent in a way that made footsteps echo too clearly. Training grounds were dark. The motor pool locked down. Barracks glowed faintly with scattered laughter and dim windows. Annex B lacked the energy of the main housing. It was a temporary place for people who never stayed long enough to matter, instructors passing through, evaluators on rotation, temporary assignments, a building where faces changed weekly and no one bothered learning names. Morgan preferred it that way. She returned to her room after a day of watching and recording everything where it couldn't be erased. She wasn't exhausted. She felt tuned, prepared, the kind of readiness that comes from witnessing people who believe the rules don't apply right before they do. She took a quick rinse, toweled dry, and slipped into training shorts and an oversized sweatshirt. Bare face, no accessories, hair still damp and pulled back without care. She wasn't dressing for attention. She was dressing the way people did on base when no one was watching, practical, easy, invisible. A folded pile of clean fatigues sat on the chair by her desk, still untouched. Morning briefing came early. The base ran its schedule with mechanical precision. Mara scooped up the laundry sack and a handful of coins from the drawer. She could have waited until dawn, but waiting always invited problems. She liked to stay ahead of them. The corridor outside her room was vacant. Just the low drone of the ventilation and a fluorescent bulb near the stairwell that buzzed and blinked. Somewhere farther down, a door clicked shut, then the building settled back into stillness. Mara headed toward the laundry room at the end of the wing, the bag knocking softly against her side. Her steps barely registered, not from caution but from habit. Years of learning how not to announce herself. Midway down the hall, she passed the service door again, the restricted one. The caution tape was still there, but the clasp beneath it looked off. Something else had changed. The tape had been smoothed down recently, too neat, like someone had opened the door and sealed it again fast, hoping no one would notice. The thought lingered, heavy, as she kept moving. The laundry room was thick with heat and detergent. 3 washers rattled, 2 dryers hummed, and a scarred folding table sat against the wall. A security camera watched the machines, but not the hallway beyond the door. Mara checked a dryer, pulled out a uniform top still warm, and snapped it once to loosen the creases. No rush. No reason to hurry. Then she heard it. Not conversation, just a muted chuckle through the wall, followed by boots scraping across tile. The sound came from the direction of the utility stairwell. Mara didn't flinch, didn't stiffen, didn't shrink. She adjusted the strap of the laundry sack and folded the blouse against her chest, the way someone did when bracing to walk past a minor irritation. She stepped back into the corridor. The quiet felt artificial, like silence on command. And suddenly she understood what the quartermaster had meant, not don't use the stairwell. Don't be seen near it. Mara kept walking. She'd been on bases with blind spots before, and she'd learned that moments like this didn't wait. She cleared the laundry room doorway, the dryer's warmth still faint in her hands, the weight of the bag steady. 10 steps ahead, 4 men stood near the end of the hall, half swallowed by shadow beneath the flickering light. They didn't move at first, just watched her appear. Then one of them, Keller, peeled away, relaxed, like he'd only just noticed her. His grin was polished, easy, charm stretched thin over something tighter beneath. He approached with one hand in his pocket, head tilted like they were about to exchange pleasantries in a forgotten corner of the base. "Evening," he said lightly. "Didn't think anyone else wandered over here this late." Mara didn't respond. She kept walking, closing the distance behind him. Rowan shifted sideways, big frame loose and deliberate, the posture of someone who enjoyed boxing people in. Ames stayed back with his arms crossed, uneasy, eyes flicking toward Slate, who held his phone low near his thigh, thumb hovering. The screen dimmed but didn't go dark. Recording? No attempt to hide it. Keller slowed when he was 2 feet away. His gaze dipped briefly, then returned to her face. "You're new, yeah," he said. "Haven't seen you in the usual rotation." Mara angled to pass him. He stepped into her path. She stopped, behind her, boots shifted. Rowan closing the space. Ames stationed himself by the laundry room door. Slate drifted back toward the utility stairwell and leaned against it, sealing it without ceremony. 4 corners. No clear pivot, no contact yet, not rushed, deliberate, rehearsed. Keller's smile thinned. "No need to be cold. This wing gets lonely at night. Thought you might want some company." Rowan chuckled softly. "Or maybe you wandered off hoping someone would notice." Mara's expression didn't change, but her eyes had already measured everything. The wall behind them, the faulty latch, the angle of the camera, the phone still rolling. Then a hand grabbed the laundry sack at her side. Rowan, she didn't fight it. He yanked it free and tossed it down the hall. Clothes scattered across the floor, fabric sliding until her uniform top came to rest near the stairwell door. "Sorry," Rowan said lazily. Cade let out a short laugh. "Signal's dead, by the way, has been for days." He wasn't boasting. He was stating a fact, laying groundwork for why none of this would matter. Marrow stepped in closer, close enough for her to feel the warmth radiating off him. His tone dropped. "If you want to keep this from getting awkward, maybe don't say anything." Levin, smiling, repeated it under his breath. "Yeah, don't say anything, Ash." Ash didn't move, didn't blink. Cade lifted the phone, screen dark now, camera still capturing everything. Marrow leaned in again, his hand hovering near her hip. "Relax. Nobody's going to know," she said quietly. "Turn it off," he said with a crooked grin. "Or what? You gonna file a report because we're talking?" His fingers skimmed the top of her waistband. Ash stayed still. But then she heard it. The sound she'd been waiting for, a zipper sliding down. Levin's hand was steady, certain. And that was when the room shifted, not louder. Not violent, authoritative, because they'd crossed the line, because this was no longer observation, it was contact. The instant the zipper moved, something inside Ash shut down, not peace, silence. The kind of silence breachers feel seconds before entry, the kind that tells the brain, act, don't think. Levin's hand was inside her waistband now, gripping, claiming, not searching, and that's when she moved. Her body didn't recoil or shout. It translated. Ash's right leg snapped upward in a clean, vertical strike, the kind trained professionals don't rehearse on padded floors. They use it in confined spaces against real threats. Her knee hit Levin square in the groin. Not a warning, a command. He didn't scream, he folded. The air left his body before sound could follow. His knees collapsed inward like a cut string, and he dropped hard onto the tile, gasping as if trying to breathe through something blocked and wet. Marrow reacted next, lunging with the blind panic of a man realizing too late that he was never in control. He wasn't trained. He wasn't ready. Ash pivoted sideways, letting his shoulder miss her by inches, then caught the collar of his jacket as he passed and yanked backward. He slammed into the wall shoulder first and slid into the corner. Bone met concrete with a sharp crack. Confidence vanished instantly, replaced by shock. Cole backed away, hands half raised. Cade stayed where he was. Phone still up. Recording still running. Still convinced he could twist this into confusion if he framed it right. Ash turned toward him. "Drop it," she said. He didn't. So she closed the distance. 2 steps, unhurried, and seized his wrist, fingers locking at the base of his thumb in a precise, practiced torque. The joint compressed inward. The phone slipped free. It hit the floor face down. The red indicator still blinking. Before he could react, she drove a flat elbow into his chest, knocking him back into the stairwell door. Not enough to break anything. Just enough to remind his spine it wasn't the one in charge. Cade slid down the door, stunned, staring at his knees like they belonged to someone else. The hallway fell silent. Levin groaned weakly from the floor. Marrow tried to rise, but his arms trembled. Cole stood frozen, mouth parted, torn between confession and panic. Ash crouched and picked up the phone. The screen was cracked. The recording light still pulsed. She tapped once, saved, then she looked at Marrow, slumped against the wall, clutching his side. "You're finished," he muttered, not loud, just resentful. Ash didn't raise her voice. "No," she said. "You are." She stepped over Levin and faced Cole directly. "You want to leave this hallway with a career still intact?" she asked, calm as cold steel. He nodded quickly. "Then you're going to walk to the end of this corridor right now," she said, "and call the duty officer. Tell him there's a systems emergency in lodging wing K-17 and he needs to bring base security. Now." Merrick didn't react at first. Tessa leaned closer, her voice low but edged with steel. "Now." That did it. He spun and bolted, nearly tripping before vanishing around the corner. She flicked a glance at Calder, who was gripping his shoulder like it might detach. His lips moved, but no sound came out. "Hands where I can see them," she said. "Stay seated." He complied instantly. Then Tessa deliberately turned her back on all of them and walked toward the laundry sack Oren had thrown earlier. Her stride never changed. She crouched, lifted her uniform top, and snapped the creases out with a single sharp motion. No one spoke. She was composed, hair damp, trousers still loose from the half-open zip, but her expression held no fear, no anger, no humiliation, only protocol. She folded the blouse cleanly and tucked it beneath her arm. When she returned to the group, she spoke evenly. "You initiated contact, you blocked exits. You recorded without consent, and you laid hands on a federal officer in uniform." She raised the phone. "Congratulations, you documented all of it." Behind her, down the corridor, running footsteps echoed, boots pounding fast. The duty NCO was seconds from walking into a situation no one had anticipated. And Tessa wasn't finished. She stood centered in the hallway, the heat fading from her skin under the artificial air. Her breathing had never faltered. Her voice hadn't wavered once. She wasn't rattled. The others were. Oren hadn't moved since he went down, curled inward, gasping, hands protecting what little remained of his pride and groin. Calder slumped against the stairwell door, blinking hard, fingers twitching as if his brain hadn't caught up with how fast control had vanished. Renner stood upright but sagging, spine pressed to the wall, arms crossed defensively, breath shallow. Waiting for another blow, it never came. It didn't need to. Her gaze passed over each of them before settling on the phone. She turned it in her hand. The cracked display still glowed, unlocked. Recording app open. Red timestamp blinking, file marked autosave complete. She tapped again. Timestamp locked, battery stable, feed uninterrupted, chain of custody initiated. Without looking up, she spoke. "Specialist Calder, hands visible, sit where I can see you." He obeyed before conscious thought caught up. The phone had shaken him more than the strike. "Sergeant Renner," she continued, "move 1 inch and I classify you as non-compliant." He froze.